So we
And
welcome you
all the way from Nakuru.
all the way from Nakuru. Yeah. Okay, so please accept our humble obeisances on behalf of everybody who have joined the group and are about to join. Prabhuji, we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are now starting a new chapter, chapter 18, which is Maharaj Parikshit cursed by a Brahmana boy. And we can do 3 texts today. So I hand over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Jai, Haribol. Text 1. Sutta uvacha yovaijon yastra viplusto namatur udare mritaha anugrahad bhagavataha Krishna syad bhutakarmanaha. Translation. Sri Sutta Goswami said, due to the mercy of the person of Godhead Sri Krishna, who acts wonderfully, Drona in his mother's womb could not be burned. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The sages of Naimisharanya became struck with wonder after hearing about the wonderful, especially in reference to his punishing the personality of Kali and making him completely unable to do any harm within the kingdom. Sutta Goswami was equally anxious to describe Maharaj Parikshit's wonderful birth and death, and this verse is stated by Sutta Goswami to increase the interest of the sages of Naimisharanya. Text 2. Translation. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmin boy. Purport. A self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayana Parayanu. Such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even of death. For him, nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord, and thus he gives equal importance to heaven and hell. He knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly, life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord. But in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayan is essential. The Narayana Paranaya practices this constantly. Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. He was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmin who was under the influence of Kali, and Maharaj Parikshit took this to be sent by Narayan. He knew that Narayan, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was burned in the womb of his mother, and if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing for the devotee. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit was neither afraid of nor bewildered by such things. That is the sign of a pure devotee. Text 3. Furthermore, after leaving all his associates, the king surrendered himself as a disciple to the son of Vyas, Shukadeva Goswami. And thus he was able to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. The word Ajita is significant here. The personality of Godhead Sri Krishna is known as Ajita, or unconquerable, and he is so in every respect. No one can know his actual position. He is unconquerable by knowledge also. We have heard about his dham, or place, eternal Goloka Vrindavan, but there are many scholars who interpret this abode in different ways. By the grace of a spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami, unto whom the king gave himself up as a most humble disciple, one is able to understand the actual position of the Lord, his eternal abode, and his transcendental paraphernalia in that dham, or abode. Knowing the transcendental position of the Lord and the transcendental method by which one can approach that transcendental dham, the king was confident about his ultimate destination. And by knowing this, he could leave aside everything material, even his own body, without any difficulty of attachment. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated, Parandvishra Nivartate. One can give up all connection with material attachment when one is able to see the param, or the superior quality of things. From Bhagavad Gita we understand the quality of the Lord's energy that is superior to the material quality of energy. And by the grace of a bona fide spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami, it is possible to know everything of the superior energy of the Lord by which the Lord manifests. His eternal name, quality, pastimes, paraphernalia, and variegatedness. Unless one thoroughly understands this superior or eternal energy of the Lord, it is not possible to leave the material energy. However, one may theoretically speculate on the true nature of the absolute truth. By the grace of Lord Krishna, Maharaj Parikshit was able to receive the mercy of such a personality as Shukadeva Goswami, and thus he was able to know the actual position of the unconquerable Lord. It is very difficult to find the Lord from the Vedic literatures, but it is very easy to know him by the mercy of a liberated devotee like Shukadeva Goswami. Jai. Omagyantamaranda Shyaganangana Shalakaya Chaksharamanitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this is the first few verses of the next chapter that we've just started, Maharaj Parikshit cursed by a Brahmin boy. We see how Prabhupada is saying he was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmin who was under the influence of Kali. This is quite an indictment of the Brahminical class. It's almost like the Brahminical class ushered in the age of Kali. Of course, we look to Brahmins, particularly in Indian society. We look to Brahmins to guide us, to teach us, to advise us in how we should conduct our lives. People respect Brahmins very much, especially in India. And of course, now this respect is spreading all over the world due to the influence of Srila Prabhupada's preaching, Prabhupada's mission, where he's gone everywhere. But at the same time, it has to be recognized that the Brahminical class, from the word go, actually, were influenced by the age of Kali. The age of Kali doesn't set any limitations on his power. His potency just wanders everywhere, in every facet of life. So you'd expect that the highest class of all, the Brahminical class, of course, the father of the Brahmin boy was lamenting the fact that his son had cursed Maharaj Parikshit. But the curse was uttered, and even the father, he said, there's nothing I can do. Such was the potency of the Brahminical class in that age. When a curse was uttered, it stood. It had to happen. But Maharaj Parikshit, because he was way above this idea of cursing, not cursing, counter-cursing, and so on and so forth, he didn't care. He was completely and totally detached. Prabhupada says here, speaking of Maharaj Parikshit, he knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly, life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord. But in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayan is essential. And Prabhupada uses that phrase, Narayana Paranaya. It's an interesting phrase. And funny enough, this phrase was also spoken by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find, and Prabhupada comments extensively on this phrase. It literally means a person who has concluded that Narayan is the supreme. And then Prabhupada goes on to say in one purport that I read today, looking up this phrase, it's not that I knew what this phrase meant, I had to look it up. A person who has concluded that Narayan is the supreme. And then Prabhupada quotes the verse from Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha. Such a great soul is very rare. And this is a fact. Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha. And the person who was born into there's I think there was a quote from Madhvacharya somewhere, and Madhvacharya said that there are millions and millions and millions of demigods. I think it was he quoted there are 90 million demigods and 70 million sages. This is a quote directly from Madhvacharya, who are called Narayana, devotees of Lord Narayan. And then amongst those, this is Madhvacharya, one of the founders of our Sampradaya. Amongst those, he is saying, only a few are called Narayana Paranaya. Very few. Sa Mahatma Sadurlabha. So it really is a very rare occasion for somebody to reach the absolute truth and to come to the conclusion, the absolute Siddhanta, the total conclusion of what is the absolute truth. It is rare. We are in a very, very fortunate position indeed to have reached a stage in our lives, in our sojourn, in our journey through so many, how many millions and millions of lifetimes, to have come in contact with Srila Prabhupada's philosophy, whether directly through association with Srila Prabhupada himself or through the philosophy, through the Vani, the vast, vast Vani that Srila Prabhupada has left us. So in reference to that phrase, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on to say in a discussion with Sanatana Goswami, one who thinks that everything is Maya, instead of thinking everything is Krishna, is called an aparadi, or an offender. So this is a pretty strong quotation from Mahaprabhu also. One who thinks that everything is Maya, instead of thinking that everything is Krishna, is called an aparadi, or offender. And yet we are led to believe through our discussions, through our classes, through reading the books, that there's certain aspects of life which we consider to be on the material side. And then there are other aspects of life which we consider to be on the spiritual side. But Mahaprabhu dismisses that, because Mahaprabhu was seeing it from the transcendental point of view of a pure devotee. He's taking on the role of a pure devotee, and he's saying that everything can be used in the service of Krishna. Everything. And nothing is left out. He goes on to say, there's two kinds of jnanis. One is inclined to devotional service and the other to impersonal realization. But one who understands that the Supreme Lord is Satchitananda Vigraha, he is the actual spiritual form of the Lord. He is on the transcendental position. He is actually a devotee. The devotee may worship Narayan or Vishnu, or get this idea that Vishnu has accepted a form of, but Vishnu is temporarily in Maya. Prabhupada, in a lecture in Nairobi in 1973, Prabhupada said, well, if Vishnu is in Maya, then that means that Maya is superior to Vishnu. So Prabhupada had an answer for everything. And he would just counteract, no matter what the argument would come up with. Prabhupada always brought it back to the personality of Godhead. There was, we're reading here in Nakuru, we started reading the Leela Amrita. So it's the devotees who have come, who are young, for the most part, young devotees, they can get some idea of the personality of Prabhupada. They sing Jai Prabhupada every day in Guru Puja and so on and so forth. But the personality and the story behind how Prabhupada started this movement, that's not so much known. And when you imbibe, when you take in even a little fraction, as we have done, a little fraction of knowing about Prabhupada and what he went through to start this movement, it just brings you closer to Prabhupada as a person, not just a figurehead, not just the title of the founder Acharya, but actually a person. And then when we know Prabhupada as a person, then we can get to know Krishna as a person. When we get to know Krishna as a person, then we can get to understand we are part and parcel of this whole phantasmagoria of spirituality, of spiritual life. The pure devotee, however, never thinks that Vishnu has accepted the body of Maya. Instead, he knows perfectly well the original absolute truth. This is the Supreme Person, such a devotee, is actually situated in knowledge. He never merges into the Brahman effulgence. But here it's a little confusing because Sutta Goswami, he's speaking about the future event, like you can see here that in verse 2. Maharaj Pariksit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmin boy. So here we're starting the story of Maharaj Pariksit cursed by a Brahmin boy, and yet Sutta Goswami is saying in the future he's going to be cursed by a Brahmin boy and he's going to be killed by a flying snake. And again, when that actually occurred, when Maharaj, at the end of the recitation of the Srimad Bhagavatam between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit, when the snake bird did actually come to bite Maharaj Pariksit, the Brahmins, they had the antidote to the poison, but they hid it. So first of all, the boy cursed Maharaj Pariksit, and then the Brahmins, they had the antidote which would have cured Maharaj Pariksit, but they hid it. So the degraded age really came in with a bang. And we see that the topmost intelligentsia, the academics, the intellectuals, the ones that we would run to automatically, they're the ones who let us down. And it has continued like that for the last 5,000 years. So this part of the Bhagavatam is kind of, it's being very flexible with time. As Sutta Goswami, he was there in present when Shukadeva Goswami was reciting the questions and answers between Maharaj Pariksit and Shukadeva Goswami. Sutta Goswami, he was sitting and he was listening. He was in the audience. So then he went later on, and the sages of Naimisharanya, they started a 1,000-year sacrifice to offset the age of Kali as much as possible. Because they knew when Maharaj Pariksit goes, that's it. He's the one that's holding back the tide of Kali Yuga. So when he goes, so they started a 1,000-year yajna, 1,000 years. So he was relating to them the entire conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. So it's kind of flexible a little bit with the time, because it's kind of like on the level of Trikala Gyan, past, present, and future are kind of merged into one. So Sutta Goswami is chopping and changing between the past, what happened in the past, what happened present, and what's going to happen in the future, because he's remembering the whole story, the whole Leela of the conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. So in the Bhagavatam, it says, "O Lord, the intelligence of those who think themselves liberated, but have no devotion, is impure. Even though they rise to the highest point of liberation by dint of severe penances and austerities, they are sure to fall down again into material existence, for they do not take shelter at your lotus feet." So it's not a question of just gaining liberation. It's not enough. And Krishna says, "Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be." Prabhupada calls them rascals. When rascals, mudas see that Krishna acts exactly like a human being, they deride the transcendental form of the Lord because they do not know the Parambhavam, his transcendental form and activities. So the king surrendered himself as a disciple, the son of Vyas, Shukadeva Goswami. So here's Sutta Goswami reciting how the story evolved and how King Maharaj Pariksit approached Shukadeva Goswami. And Prabhupada is saying here, the word Ajita is significant here. The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is unconquerable. And it's also interesting, in the last paragraph, the last sentence, Prabhupada was saying, it's very difficult to find the Lord from Vedic literatures. That seems like a strange thing to say. It's not by simply reading the books, as Prabhupada described elsewhere, But it was very easy to know him by the mercy of a liberated devotee like Sukadeva Goswami. This is the only way. We have to see things through the eyes of the Guru, not only through the eyes of Shastra. Prabhupada was saying here, you're reading Vedic literatures, it's very difficult to reach the perfection by the grace of a bona fide spiritual master. That's why Maharaj Pariksit approached Sukadeva Goswami, so as he could gain the highest source of knowledge. Krishna goes on to say in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, those who are bewildered are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruit of activities, and the culture of knowledge are all defeated. And we certainly have a situation today, in this day and age, where everybody is engaged in demoniac activities. People cannot understand, they can't imagine how a person like Krishna could be the origin of everything. It's inconceivable to them. We can see how strong this impersonalist approach to life is. And let's face it, let's face the facts. The vast majority of the temples that we see in India, whilst they may have deities and they may have so many people coming and taking darshan and so on, the vast majority are under the auspices of the Shankaracharya mentality, where it's all one, it's all impersonal. At the end of life, we are temporarily God, and we are temporarily in this material world, but sooner or later, when we reach perfection, then we merge into the absolute. There's no personality involved. But Krishna says the opposite, Govinda Madhipurisham Tamaham Bhajami. People like that are described as Mogashaha, baffled in their hopes. And we're mixed with this also. We're mixed in this idea of personal versus impersonal, because we're coming from that background. Certainly all the major religions, like Christianity, certainly Islam, and certainly Judaism, all the Western religions that are so prominent in Western culture, particularly Christianity, it's all impersonal. There's no, yes, they say God is great and God is this and God is that and God is unlimited and so on and so forth. But there's no idea of God as a person. So here Maharaj Pariksit is going to inquire from Shukadeva Goswami about the personality of Godhead. But so Krishna is saying these people are baffled in their hopes. They will never reach perfection. Even if they imperfectly engage in devotional service, they're described as Moksha, because ultimately they desire to merge into the Brahman effulgence. This is like death for a devotee. But when we engage in personal interaction, certainly with other devotees, with the Guru, with personalities like Srila Prabhupada, automatically we can get a glimpse into the absolute truth of the personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, and be a part of his pastimes. Prabhupada goes on to say, unless the dirt within the core of your heart is cleansed away, you cannot become a devotee. We have to rid it. The heart is like it's like a piece of coal when you're trying to wash a piece of coal under the tap. If you have water, and it just goes black and black and black and black and black. You can wash it forever. The still remains black. So we have accumulated millions and trillions of years of this blackness on our hearts that we carry from one body and one lifetime to the next. And now, in this one lifetime, Prabhupada said in Melbourne, Australia, in a second, you can go and reach the absolute truth, where your heart can be cleansed in a second, provided we take to the process. Why do we call it the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the greatest mantra? And what is that mantra doing? Man is mind, tra is free, freeing the mind from all this rubbish, all these past accumulated karmas from previous existences, previous lifetimes. It's all washed away in a second, provided we take to the process. In spite of the obstacles that we face in life, it is possible. But Krishna says, and he reminds us, Samahatma Sudurlabha. The word Durlabha is very rarely found. That's what it means, very rarely found. So are we a part of this Samahatma Sudurlabha? We should be. We hope that we would be, but we have to stick with the process in spite of all the obstacles that may be there. Not only among hundreds and thousands, but among millions, Prabhupada is saying, of perfectly liberated souls, a pure devotee is hardly ever found. Can you imagine? So it's amongst the liberated. They're already liberated. They've already gained moksha. But still, one who is actually attached to Krishna's lotus feet, this is very rare. That's why Madhvacharya is describing it as such. Millions and millions and 70 million sages, 90 million demigods are all called Narayana Ana, devotees of Lord Narayan. Among them, only a few are called Narayana Parayana. Imagine. And we are way, way, way ahead of this if we're following the process. The difference between the Siddhas, Prabhupada says, and Narayana Paranayas is that direct devotees are called Narayana Paranayas, whereas those who perform various types of mystic yoga are called Siddhas. So it's not the same. So we can't become confused. We can't allow ourselves to become confused. And it's very easy to do so. In the lecture on last Thursday, Vishnu Swami came to Nairobi on Thursday. He had just come from Dar es Salaam. And of course, he preaches for the most part in South America. He preaches a lot in Africa, but he preaches for the most part in South America, which is predominantly Christian. And so he always thinks in terms of how do I convince the Christians about the personality of God? How do I convince the Christians to take to this process of devotional service? Because they're close, so near and yet so far. They are close. So he gave the example. He quoted the Lord's Prayer. It was a very interesting point. I mean, I myself come from a Christian background, and I never thought of it before. He quoted the Lord's Prayer and he said, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." That's the first line of the Lord's Prayer that Jesus gave to his disciples, that he said that they should recite constantly. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. But Mahavishnu Swami said, but who is the Father that Jesus is speaking of? See, it's all, in Christianity also, it's all yatomat tatopat. Everybody does their own thing and everybody, it's all good, it's all transcendental. No, it's not. Who is the Father? This is what we have to explain. This is what we have to explain to each other. And those of us who has come to this process this far, we have to stick firmly with the process. Yantascha dridhavrata, one of my favorite verses from the Gita. Yatantascha dridhavrata, with determination, because Maya is there ready to push us over and get rid of us at every single moment in time. As Prabhupada is saying in the purport here, by the grace of a spiritual master like Shukadeva Goswami, unto whom the king gave himself up as a most humble disciple, one is able to understand the actual position of the Lord. His eternal abode, his transcendental paraphernalia, and that dham or abode. Knowing the transcendental position of the Lord and the transcendental method by which one can approach the transcendental dham, the king was confident about his ultimate destination. So how confident are we? To what extent have we gained that confidence? The same degree of confidence that the king gained. Remember, we're not in any position that King Parikshit, Maharaj Parikshit was in. We're not any different. Okay, he was a king, he's a transcendentalist, he's a pure devotee. But at the same time, he's knowing that in 7 days he's going to die. So it's guaranteed for him. He knows I'm going to die in 7 days because of the curse of the Brahmin boy. We have no idea. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, years, whatever. But he knew exactly in 7 days it's finished. It's all over. So what do I do in the meantime? So our situation is a lot more dangerous. Padam padam yadvi padam natesham. In this material world is danger at every step. We've been reading in the Lilamrita, the very early days in Srila Prabhupada and Dr. Mishra's ashram in New York. Of course, Dr. Mishra, he's coming from the Mayavadi Impersonalist school of yoga. Srila Prabhupada is coming from the personalist, Vaishnav approach to the philosophy. So whilst Dr. Mishra was very accommodating to Srila Prabhupada, he put him up in his apartment, he gave him a room, he wouldn't let him speak to his disciples, he wouldn't let Prabhupada interact with the people in his apartment. And ultimately, after a few weeks of Srila Prabhupada being there, Dr. Mishra gave the hint to Prabhupada, I think it's time to move out. I think it's time you got your own place. So Dr. Mishra, to make the move out easier, he suggested, I have another room in another part of New York. You can have that. And that place was a dump. But Prabhupada took it, in spite of all the obstacles and everything like that. And then just after a few weeks there, Prabhupada came back one day from doing a little bit of shopping. We read how Prabhupada paid for a little packet of chili powder. Prabhupada paid 25 cents, and he was calculating how that was 10 times the price of what he would pay in India. Prabhupada had no income. And in this alternative place which Dr. Mishra gave him, it had a glass door in the building to Prabhupada's room. And when he came back one day from doing his little bit of shopping, the janitor told Prabhupada that somebody broke in, a thief came and stole your typewriter and stole your tape recorder. And Prabhupada got the impression from the way the janitor was talking, it was actually the janitor who stole it. So everything was gone. What little Prabhupada had was gone. He had an almirah where he kept his books that he used as a desk. And it's described, it's so amazing to see. It's described how Prabhupada would lay his 2 blankets on the floor, 2 blankets on the concrete floor that he used as his mattress. And he covered himself with his chadar. And there was a blizzard of snow overnight. Prabhupada woke up in the morning, hadn't seen snow before, and was amazed at 7-8 feet of snow. The whole of New York ground to a halt. Freezing conditions. People who lived in the tenements in New York, they had to go to certain places where the government had appointed so they could get some heat so they wouldn't freeze to death in their own apartment. Poor people who couldn't have heat in their apartment. And and then everything, what little Prabhupada had, everything was stolen. And Prabhupada went through all of this for us. The Narayana Parayana, a person who has concluded that Narayan is the supreme. This was foremost in Srila Prabhupada's heart. This was constant. He said to one man, Mr. Rubin, that was his name, not doctor, Mr. Rubin, who was a conductor on the New York subway. He met Prabhupada, and they used to sit and talk. For a few days, they would meet. Mr. Rubin would go for his tiffin break, and Prabhupada would go for walking in Central Park, and they would sit and chat together. And Mr. Rubin, he said that Prabhupada said, no, I'm never alone. Mr. Rubin thought he was alone. Prabhupada said, no, I'm never alone. There are so many temples. There's so many followers. There's so many projects. They're all there. They're just separated by time. And we're in the same position. We're just separated by time from reaching perfection, from ending up in Goloka Vrindavan, from dancing with Krishna, from going out with the cowherd boys and having fun with Krishna on the tiffin break. We're just separated by time. We just have to stick with it. Prabhupada is saying how when the son is inheriting the business of the father, the empire of the father, the wealth of the father, whatever the case may be, all he has to do is stay alive. Automatically, he's going to inherit. All he has to do is stay alive and stick with it. And that's all we have to do. We just have to stick with the process and make sure that this lifetime is no more, no more, no more of this birth, death, old age, and disease. Nothing is Maya. Mahaprabhu was saying it. Everything, agyata sukriti, everything can be used in the service of Krishna, regardless of our situation, just as Prabhupada did. And when the janitor, as suspected by Srila Prabhupada, broke into his apartment and stole whatever little valuables Srila Prabhupada had to sell those things for a few pennies, put Prabhupada in a very awkward situation, Prabhupada thought, I have to move out of here. And by chance, nothing is by chance, of course. One boy came along who used to be attending Srila Prabhupada's lectures in Dr. Mishra's ashram. And he said, you should move to the Lower East Side, the Bowery. That's where it's all happening. That's where people are drifting from every state in the United States, coming from all over the United States. People are going to the East Village. People are searching, and they seem to think that they can find whatever they're looking for in the East Village. And so many things just happen. As soon as Prabhupada moved to the East Village, which is considered to be the lower part of New York, the low-class area, but Prabhupada didn't care. He saw that in Dr. Mishra's ashram, the older people, they weren't interested. They wanted some fancy yoga positions and some idea that if they do this Astanga yoga or Hatha yoga or whatever, that this will help them reach perfection. As Prabhupada said, most of Dr. Mishra's activities were maintained by old women wealthy old women who had nothing better to do, and all of his audience, practically speaking, were a much older audience. Prabhupada was interested in the youth. And it was the youth that brought Prabhupada his mission all over the world to fulfill the desire of his spiritual master. That was foremost in his mind. And it should be foremost in our mind. If such a person becomes a Narayana Paraniya devotee of the Lord, he is better than a Jivan Mukta, who is liberated or perfect. Prabhupada goes on to say, this requires higher intelligence. We have to develop, what's the name of the book we sell all over the world? Higher taste. Why do we call it higher taste? Because we're used to having all our comforts around us, and that's what we consider normal: family, society, friends, home, hearth, and kith and kin, and everything around us that we're used to all the time. But then when someone comes along, gives us a higher taste or an opportunity to develop a higher taste, are we really willing to go for it, to jump for it, to take that leap of faith and really throw ourselves into the fray of actually becoming devotees, not just in name? It's an effort, it's a struggle, and the result is quite incredible. But we have to keep at it. As Prabhupada said, this requires higher intelligence. We're not jnanis, we're not yogis, we're personalists. So we have to keep Krishna foremost in our mind. And as Prabhupada says, I am never alone. So we're never alone either. We might be alone in our head. There may be so many things going on in our head which are just dragging us down. We don't know the solution. But we should end up in a situation where our consciousness is thinking in the same way as Prabhupada, I'm never alone. Krishna is guiding me at every single moment in time. And I should take advantage of that. And not just theoretically think, oh yeah, it'll happen. One day it'll happen. No. Prabhupada said, as he said in Melbourne, it can happen in a second. So this should be our motivation, to make it happen in a second. To increase the quality of our rounds, to increase the quality of our devotion, our service, whatever little service we can perform, but most importantly, to increase the quality of our rounds. And to do that, we have to be in a peaceful state of mind. But how do we get into a peaceful state of mind? By chanting. Regardless of the quality of our rounds, we chant. And then how do we chant more? By getting into a peaceful state of mind. And how does that chanting, what's the end result of that chanting? Giving us a peaceful state of mind. And then what does that allow us to do? Even chant even more. All those who understand the personality of Godhead, the Satchidananda Vigraha, as Maharaj Parikshit does, that is the actual spiritual form. That is the perfection. Nothing else. So Maharaj Parikshit, he didn't care about the curse. He didn't care about, he was completely and totally beyond it. Not even of death. And as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Parijajya Mamakam Saranambuja Aham Tvam Sarva Papayubhyo Mokshi Shashmi Masujaha. Just give up all varieties of religion, surrender unto me. I will give you protection, do not fear. So what does it mean by this, do not fear? Do not fear what? There's nothing to do with death. Devotee doesn't fear death. So what is Krishna thinking about? What is Krishna telling us here? Do not fear. What is it that we should fear the most? Losing our devotional creeper. I will give you protection. I will help you to keep your devotional creeper intact if you surrender to me. Not that Krishna is going to protect us from the fear of death. There will be no fear of death if we're on the Brahma Bhuta platform, if we're on this pure transcendental platform. And we kind of think in terms either, oh, this high platform only belongs to the great souls. We're a part of the great souls. Samahatma Sudurlabha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Are we part of the Gaura Bhakta Brinda or not? These are really strong answers that we have to come up with in our own mind. And when we do, then the world's our oyster. There's no limit. The word impossible, Srila Prabhupada said, exists in the dictionary of a fool. Nothing is impossible. We are our own worst enemy, holding ourselves back. So now, with this great, great, great opportunity to really get into it and really perfect it and really take shelter of japa and really focus on the sound vibration that's being produced and dive in. As the saying goes, it's an ocean of devotion with no commotion and nothing but promotion. So let's go for it. I'll stop there. If there are any questions or comments, I'll just read the first verse again. Sri Sutta Goswami said, due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who acts wonderfully, Maharaj Parikshit, though struck by the weapon of the son of Drona in his mother's womb, could not be burned. Jai. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Prasanatma, Hari Bol. Welcome to the club. Prasanatma met me in Nairobi when I was there. Very, very nice. It's really nice to meet the face in person That's only a name on a screen, because I never even saw him before, because he never switches on his video. But then I met him in Nairobi. He was such a lovely devotee, so nice to meet, and engage the way we did in Nairobi. He spent the night in Nairobi in the temple, came to Mangalarti. Wow, getting up at 3:30. That's a job and a half. But it's nice. It's nice to be back in the groove and doing all these things again. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm
Correct.
supposed to be setting the example for others, but the others are setting the example for me. So it's really great. Very, very nice.
This
So
is
this is a wonderful section of the Bhagavatam, and we have to hang on every word, every single word. Yeah, and you see in the third verse, after leaving all his associates, see what Maharaj Pariksit had to do? Just like Prabhupada had to leave Vrindavan, the comfort of Vrindavan. The king surrendered himself as a disciple to the son of Vyas, Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva Goswami, he left for the forest when he was born. Imagine, when he was born, 16 years old, 16 years in the womb. He said, no, I'm not coming out. I'm not coming out. He came out and said, okay, boom, straight to the forest. Straight, renunciant from the word go. The son of Vyasadeva. And thus he was able to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. This is the crucial part. The actual position of the personality of Godhead. This is what Maharaj Pariksit understood. So he was engaging with Shukadeva Goswami, who was the parrot, simply repeating what he heard from Radharani, Shukadev. Maharaj Pariksit was already a pure devotee, wasn't afraid of death. So why, just like Krishna and Arjuna engaged in that whole conversation in Bhagavad Gita for our benefit, Maharaj Pariksit and Shukadeva Goswami had that question and answer session over a period of 7 days for our benefit. Yes, they were relishing it at every moment in time. Their hairs were standing on end, as described in different sections in the Bhagavatam, when they're hearing these different pastimes of the Supreme Lord and his associates and the demigods. And there's so much intrigue in the Bhagavatam, so much politics and subterfuge and counterfuge and so on and so forth. And it goes on. It's just an amazing stories within stories. But it's all bliss. And imagine this huge 10 volumes, at least what Prabhupada commented on. There was one point in time when I think it was Harikesh Maharaj, he came to Prabhupada's room. He was his typist, his secretary, his servant, everything rolled into one. In the mid-70s, Prabhupada was typing every day. Prabhupada was getting up at midnight and typing and typing and typing, dictating, and Harikesh would type up. So 1, 2, 3, 4 days had gone by. Prabhupada hadn't given him a tape, not a single tape. This is very unusual. There was usually 2 or 3 tapes a day. And he would quickly type them up, give them back to Prabhupada. Prabhupada would quickly go through them and add or subtract any corrections. And there was 2 or 3 days went by when nothing came from Prabhupada, and he was bewildered. He didn't want to disturb Prabhupada. He knew Prabhupada's mood. He knew Prabhupada didn't want frivolous questions when he's typing his Bhagavatam. But one morning he just went into Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, you haven't given me any tape for the last 3 or 4 days. And I'm worried, I'm concerned, what's going on? And Prabhupada said, there's one word in Sanskrit, and I'm trying to find the English word that will match that word. Because it's so important. And I've gone through Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, saw all the previous acharyas, trying to find this word and that word, another word that would match that Sanskrit word, but I keep coming back to that Sanskrit word, and I have to find the English equivalent that will fit that. Just like Prabhupada explained to us so many times, the word dharma. literally the translation in English is religion, but it doesn't mean religion. And probably explain that also. On so the dharma of sugar is to be sweet, the dharma of salt to be salty, and so on and so forth. We know all those examples. But there was similarly a word that Prabhupada was searching for, like dharma, the equivalent of religion. It was another word, and because every word for Prabhupada was crucial, absolutely crucial, so as we would not misunderstand what the intention of the previous acharyas were, what the intention of Shukadeva Goswami is in giving the answer to Maharaj Pariksit 5,000 years ago. How much effort Prabhupada put into these books? How much? How much effort Prabhupada put into his lifetime in New York in the early days and struggling with all those obstacles and everything and that being robbed and so on and so forth in a completely alien environment, like dropping somebody from New York into the middle of India and said, okay, now go, survive. Not speaking a word of Hindi, nothing. At least Prabhupada spoke English. New Yorkers, I doubt they speak English. They speak a kind of English. But Americans, they don't have a clue about English. It's a completely different language. But you get the idea. Completely different environment, a different culture, everything. Still, Prabhupada struggled and managed to manifest this amazing society that is now worldwide everywhere. And people are joining every day. Every day. Even in the time I was in Nairobi for a few days, people were joining in that time. It's so nice to see. But Prabhupada took great, great, great care to translate these books and make sure in the word for word, particularly, that there was an exact word to match the Sanskrit. The genius of Prabhupada, unlimited. So we really have to scrutinizingly study these books, scrutinizingly, and really, really take them to heart and take them. It's for our benefit. It's for our own benefit. Nobody else will gain except us, but we have to make the effort, at least to read the book. Something comes every day. Something comes. Every time I pick up the book, there's something new comes. Wow. I read the same verse a million times and I didn't see that before. So we have to at least give back to Prabhupada in some small part the effort that he gave to us to produce these books. We have to at least reciprocate in some small way by reading them, as we are doing here in these wonderful classes that are being conducted by Kirtika Mataji. And it's a fantastic opportunity to churn this ocean of devotion. And it is an ocean of devotion. Just take from it. It's all honey. It's all sweet. Any questions? Finally, last chance. Going once, going twice. Bong. Finished. That's it. Time up. Sorry. It's 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. I should have been in bed half an hour ago.
Is it too late?
Is it too late?
Too late.
Well, it's not. Well, it is for me. I'm an old man. I have to go to bed at 7 to get up at 3:30 for Mangalarti.
Okay, very, very quick question, but I didn't ask earlier because it's not directly related to the class. First of all, please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you for the wonderful words. But this is something to do with partly related about, the chanting you were talking about the other earlier. So usually, during the workday, etc., sometimes it's difficult to finish the rounds in the morning, and then you think, okay, I'll take my japa bead, and then during the day, if I get some time between work, I'll be able to do the japa. Now, the other day I was listening to an online class, and where the Prabhuji was saying that in Hari Bhakti Vilas, it says that you really should not take your japa beads out, and there has to be proper ways in which, things you have to do before you even touch those beads. And to walk around with your japa beads is not really right. So so in that case, is it only right to do rounds in, at home after taking a bath, etc. But when we see Prabhupada's videos, he's always walking around with his strap of beads.
Always. Yeah, always.
So there to be,
And Prabhupada never stopped chanting.
yeah,
He always had his hand in his bead bag, even when he was talking. He always
yeah.
had his hand in his bead bag, and he was always fingering his beads. Prabhupada could do so many things simultaneously. As regards to not taking your beads out, I mean, I'm completely fallen. I take my beads out all the time. I go for a walk when I'm in Birmingham. I do all my rounds outdoors because I need, first of all, I need the exercise. I'm too fat, and I need to get around and just get some fresh air, get out of the house, especially in winter in England. It's awful. So I get out winter or summer, rain or snow. I go out every day and I do my chanting. There was one proviso that was given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that I read about years ago, or it's in one of his poems, but I think it was in Jaiva Dharma. It may not have been an appropriate topic for a poem, so it was probably in Jaiva Dharma where I'm vaguely remembering this now. I can't find the exact quote in my head, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you chant with your beads out of your bead bag, the Bhutas, they take the advantage. But that was the only reference that I ever heard to not chanting your beads, not chanting on your beads outside of your house after taking bath, or not chanting only. And so many devotees in all the temples I've been to, they go out for a japa walk after Mangalarti to keep fit. And certainly, as you know, as you just quoted yourself, Prabhupada did it all the time. So I'm not sure what that devotee was referring to,
He,
but there may be some rule somewhere along the line that says you shouldn't do this, you
he
shouldn't,
he
but
was
I
quoting
don't know.
from Hari Bhakti Vilas. Is that Sanatan Goswami's? I don't know. But I could have understood wrongly, Prabhuji. But I just thought
There
it
are,
not
well,
directly.
there are places also where Srila Prabhupada says the Hari Bhakti Vilas is not for our line, believe it or not. And we're somehow or other above the Hari Bhakti Vilas. And Lord Chaitanya himself says there are no hard and fast rules for chanting. So, it depends on the circumstances. I don't know which part of the Hari Bhakti Vilas that was being referred to, but certainly Srila Prabhupada didn't follow that rule. And whatever Srila Prabhupada did, for me, I hold my hands up. That's enough. That's all I know. I mean, what was
Thank you,
being referred
Prabhuji.
to.
Yeah,
There's so many rules. There's
mm,
so many rules, honestly, and we meet them all the time, and we're breaking so many rules. And we're, as Ajamil said to me the other day, Ajamil, the Prabhupada disciple who used to be temple president in Nairobi, he's a fanatic about Ekadashi. He's always on my case because I eat on Ekadashi. The only Ekadashi I don't eat is Nirjal. Well, it says this and it says that in the Bhagavatam. It says this, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and you have to observe Nirjal every Ekadashi. I said, well, yeah, okay, fine. Or you won't go back to Godhead, okay. But Prabhupada didn't do it. Prabhupada didn't do Nirjal. Prabhupada, ate so many things that, I know so many other devotees don't eat, and so on and so forth. If we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're following to the best of our ability. We're taking the guidance of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So many things that Prabhupada said in the early days in New York, there are a million rules and regulations. If I was to reveal them all to you, you become completely bewildered. Prabhupada didn't even insist in the first and second initiations that he did Prabhupada didn't even insist on the regulative principles being followed. Can you imagine? What to speak of taking your bead bag outside of your house? So Prabhupada would go out for his walk from 26 Second Avenue, and down the street was the coffee shop with all the devotees sitting in the coffee shop, drinking their coffee and eating their donuts, and they'd slink down behind the table so as Prabhupada wouldn't see them.
Mm.
You know,
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. That's really reassuring to hear, because yeah, I was in a bit of a dilemma as to what to do, but thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that. Thank
Jai,
you.
Haribol.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Krishna, I think we've exhausted our time, but I want to welcome a new devotee who has joined, Latasha. Thank you very much, Mataji, for joining this group. We meet every day at the same time, same place with different mentors. So kindly join in every day. Where are you from, Mataji? If you're able to unmute. But if not, we will chant 3 Haribols to welcome you. Everybody, let's chant 3 Haribols before we close this session for Lata.
Jai.
Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol.
Thank you very much. We'll close this session. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Sorry we didn't have a lot of time for questions, but we'll catch you up next week. Arya Govind Prabhu, you have switched on your mic and your video. Kindly end the session. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhuji. All glories. The wonderful session as usual, and a lot of practical tips on like how to be Krishna conscious. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. I request all the devotees to chant, unmute and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra once in glorification of His grace, Vidura Prabhu.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Bol. Thank you very much.
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu
Sindhuvebacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hari Bol.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Prabhuji ki jai.
Jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Jai.